How's it going, guys? Today I want to talk to you about the tube jig. Now most of the time I'm going to be throwing tube jigs, it's going to be either cold water situations or if there's little to no vegetation around. Now most of the time I'm throwing it in the spring or the fall, not much vegetation. It's kind of a rock pile kind of bait for me, or no vegetation, clear water situations. I love them for smallmouth. I have caught largemouth with them, but most of the time on a real clear lake, maybe around scattered lily pads with no weeds on the bottom, or scattered bulrushes with just sand around, I'll throw a tube jig. But most of the time when it comes to summer fishing for largemouth, I usually have different other baits that I would normally throw. But for smallmouth especially, this is one of my favorite baits to catch a smallmouth with. So kind of the two colors that I go with, it's kind of a lighter green pumpkin color and then a darker green, just for starters. I don't really use much of the browns and stuff because by the time the crawfish get their more brown color, I'm not using it anyway. And I found something with a lot of shine to it, a lot of iridescence, especially for smallmouth. They like the brighter colors. So this color I really had good success with last year. It's light melon perch. This is just a Gander Mountain 3.5 inch salt tube, they call it. And this is what the bait looks like. Orange, chartreuse, some black, but 3.5 inch there. And when it comes to the tube jig heads, again, if you haven't seen, I'll put them up there. There'll be little iCards that'll come across the past videos I've done on the tackle videos here. But on some of the other things that I've touched on is when it comes to more of a finesse technique or something, I'm going to go with bigger weights. This is actually a 5/8 ounce Strike King tube jig weight. Now most people are thinking, well, 5/8 is too heavy. But I also have some 1/8 ounce weights. Now this is way too small for me because I just can't do it. I just have them because they came with some of the tube jigs I did. But when it comes to tube jigs, heavier the weight, it seems like I can get more of the reaction bite. A lot of times a 1/2 ounce is the smallest weight. I have some 1/2 ounces in there. 1/2 ounce is the smallest tube jig weight that I'm going to go with. 5/8, 3/4 ounce, even 1 ounce tube jig weights, depending on how deep I'm fishing. But most of the time, a heavier style weight, a heavier bulk weight anyway, is something where I have my most success. Mark Zona came out with a video a little while back dealing with tube jigs and the different style weights. Now I don't have any of his weights, but I want to get some of them. They call them the bowling ball weights, because if you see here how the weight is kind of, the lead is distributed back here. What Mark Zona did is he took this and the lead stops like right here, and it's all bulked up into the front so that tube jig just shoots like a rocket down to the bottom. Now most of the time when it comes to a tube jig, I'm using two different styles of retrieves. Obviously you're going to make it long cast, as long cast as you can make. Most of the time, if I'm using a heavier weight, I'm throwing on a bait caster setup or a spinning setup, whatever you prefer. If I decide to go with braid, I'm going to at least have a 4 to 5 foot fluorocarbon leader on there, because of most of the time, like I said, I'm throwing these in clear water. Otherwise, I'm going to throw it on straight fluorocarbon line. And long casts. Now, if there is rock around, I will actually drag the tube jig, have it bump along. And if it pulls to where the tube jig gets stuck, like my hand's a rock here in this tube jig, and you're pulling it, it's bouncing, it gets stuck. I'll kind of lean on it a little bit with my rod, and I'll let it sit there, because a lot of times when you hit the contact like there, if I hit, those tails will kick up, and if a fish is following it, they'll eat it. So anyway, if I'll hit the rock, and then I'll actually just either try and pop it, and if it doesn't come off, you just play the banjo kind of thing, snap your line. And what that does is it snap, and then all of a sudden this tube, if my hand's a rock again, this tube jig will just doop, and it will come back and sit here. Obviously this is imitating a crayfish, and just that little doop pop. Sometimes if there's a fish nose down on it, that little action of it popping up, they'll suck it in. The other retrieve that I use that I get a lot more bites on, I fished a tournament last year to where there was rock about 10 to 15 yards out from the shore. It was all smaller rock, so I would drag the tube jig and then it turned into nothing but sand. And once I started dragging it and it felt real soft like I was in the sand, I would actually just kind of reel down and pop it. Now what this does is a tube jig sitting here, and when you jerk the tube jig, it actually like darts up and then comes back down, and the different weight and style of weights that you have for your tube jig, and even different styles of tube jigs, the way it flares up and comes back down is going to be totally different, so you got to play with it. But when I'm cracking that thing, they call it, reel it down, let it sit, maybe hop it a couple times, but I'm going to hit it again. That tube jig darting up and down, I get a lot of bites on that, especially last fall when I was fishing it. I mean, it was basically just a soft, silty bottom where I was fishing this last fall, no rock really, and the fish were stacked up because it was in the fall. I'd throw it down, parallel down with the bank, let it hit the bottom, crack it once, let it go back down, crack it again, and a lot of times they would hit it on the fall, so you don't want a totally slack line, you don't want a tight line, you just want a controlled slack line to where your line will twitch when you know you get a bite. Reel down on them and set the hook. If you find yourself losing fish, I did this during practice for that tournament I mentioned last spring. If you find yourself losing fish on a tube jig, now this is only a 3.5 inch tube jig, and most of the time a smallmouth can handle that. But if you're having trouble, actually when you feel that bite, let them take it and run with it a little bit. And another trick you can do is kind of bounce your rod tip a little bit, which simulates and kind of pulls on their mouth, simulating the crayfish trying to get away. I've actually done it to where I feel the fish grab it, swim off, and I tick that line a little bit, and I can feel a thump, thump, and that's him just sucking it down even farther, and then set the hook. Now, with the hook set, you don't necessarily need to jack the hook, because I'll set you, most of the time, you don't need to jack on the hook, because this one's all rigged up, ready to go here. And look, that hook is exposed. Now if you're fishing a weedless style tube jig where you can rig it up weedless, then you're going to want to set the hook a little bit harder. But most of the time, if you're using a strong enough rod and strong enough line, it's not as soft as a drop shot where you just pull on it. You're going to have to set it, but you're not setting the hook like on a Senko or on a jig or anything like that, because this hook is totally open. There's no weed guard, and it's not skin hooked or anything. So most of the time I'll just set the hook normally, but I'm not drop shot hooking where I just kind of reel down on them, but I'm not wailing on them like I'm setting the hook on a frog. So I hope you guys learned something in this week's tackle video. Again, a tube jig is a phenomenal bait for both largemouth and smallmouth bass, and I've even caught walleyes on these baits. And next week we're going to be talking about the square bill crankbait, another great technique that we're going to be digging into my box here, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching. See you next week. Thanks for watching Preston Outdoors.